Hi everyone, my name is Steven, and today our topic is ethics. We're going to begin with one question. Let's say there is no God. How do we know what is right and wrong? Now, notice the question is not asking, let's say if you do not believe in God, how can you know what is right and wrong? And the question is also not about, well, if you do not believe in God, how can you do that which is right and that which is wrong? No, that is not the question. For example, if you ask the question, can people who do not believe in God do that which is right and not do that which is wrong? Absolutely, they can, and they often do. And we know that that is not what we are asking. Neither are we saying, well, if you do not believe in God, can you even know what is right and wrong? You can. You can know what is right and wrong. But if there is no God, how do we know what is right and wrong? Now, I'm going to argue that the only reason why we can even know what is right and wrong is because God exists. Whether you believe in his existence or not is not what's the most important thing to this question, but that he must exist for us to even know what is right and wrong. And many people have tried to come up with a formula or a basis for telling apart right and wrong in the absence of the existence of God. And that is what we are going to be looking at this session. Sources of ethics. So we're going to be looking at two main potential candidates for the sources of ethics. One is teleological ethics, and the other is deontological ethics. We're going to be looking at teleological ethics first. That something is right if it produces the right results. The other one, deontological ethics, something is right because it is right. Now, let's look at the first one. Something is right if it produces the right results. This is called teleological ethics. It comes from the Greek word telos, which means a goal or an end, a design. Teleological ethics means that if something turns out right, then it is right. If it has the right result, then it is right. If it has the wrong result, then it is wrong. It is very result oriented. Does it end up well? If I kill a person, does it end up well? Well, if it ends up with you going into prison, then it's no good. If it results in society crumbles, then it is no good. Of course, the question, why is it bad if you end up in prison, or why is it bad if society crumbles, remains a question in itself, isn't it? Why is something right or wrong, good or bad? Well, let's try teleological ethics. We're going to begin with a guy by the name of Jeremy Bentham. He came up with a theory called utilitarianism. He says the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the foundation of morals and legislation. How should we do morality? How should we do law? Well, we should do it this way. The right thing to do is to do that which achieves the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. And that is Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism. So we all have a value of happiness when we do certain things. When we eat a burnt cheesecake, we derive certain happiness from it. When we pet a dog, we derive certain amount of happiness from it. When we look at the sunset, we derive some value of happiness from it. Now, if we can do something that produces the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people, then that must be the right thing to do. For example, if you kill people, maybe you will derive a great amount of happiness from it, but a lot of people will suffer. So the unhappiness that murder generates results in a negative happiness value in total, or so he says. And therefore, when you sum it up together, if only we can have some kind of a happiness counting machine or happiness calculus, then we can calculate the happiness value or the utility value of every action that we can take and see whether it is net positive or net negative, or that we choose the one that is the greatest positive result. Now, of course, there's a few problems with it, isn't it? Number one, how do you know how to calculate happiness? It is rather subjective, isn't it? Some people derive happiness from wrong things. If enough people derive happiness from doing wrong, more than people derive happiness from doing that which is right, does that now mean that doing that which is wrong is the right thing to do because it generates more happiness for people than doing the right thing? And you yourself have experienced that sometimes the thing that gives you the most happiness is not doing the right thing, but doing the wrong thing. And other people may even agree with you because what you want to do is to be happy. And that's what people say. All I want to do is to be happy. Why did you do that result? Why did you do that thing that you do? Why did you make that mistake? Why did you make that decision? Well, I only wanted to be happy. And many people will agree with you that that is what would make them happy and make a lot of other people happy if they were in your shoes. Number two, we will almost never know whether something is ultimately good or bad. Let's just say you decided to drop out from school and start a business. Is it the right thing to do or not? Well, it really depends on how much happiness that gives you and give other people. What is the sum total of that happiness? Well, the sum total of that happiness within the first 5 hours may not be very great because your parents is gonna be really upset, and that makes you also very unhappy. It is a decision that you have made, and you lost all your friends because all your friends are still in school while you have started a business, and that results in some unhappiness. And like I said, your parents are unhappy with you, and that also caused some unhappiness in you. So maybe you say, well, maybe dropping out from school has very low utility. That is to say, it is not the right thing to do. But wait a minute. 2 years from now, you made a lot of money and you made new friends and you bought your parents a new house because instead of studying mathematics and physics and chemistry in school, you actually did business and you did very well. You made a lot of money and you made a lot of people happy. Well, was that a good decision or not? Your first decision of dropping out from school and starting a business, and then 2 years later you say yes, it was a good decision. But maybe that's too soon, isn't it? Maybe 10 years from now in your class reunion, and you realize that everyone in your class had progressed because they stayed in school, while your business suffered some major setbacks here and there, and you were in all sorts of debt, and you see your friends advancing in their careers as lawyers, as doctors and engineers, and make more money than you, and you come home unhappy. Your family is unhappy. They wish you stayed in school. So, was it the right decision? So, turns out that 10 years from now, it was the wrong decision because it had low utility. So, the utility of any action fluctuates over time. And it is always too soon to tell. We have no knowledge of everything. We are not omniscient. We do not cut across time and space. We are time bound. We are not God who can see the end of everything to know whether a particular action was good or bad. So that is why utilitarianism has some problems with it, isn't it? There are two kinds of utilitarianism. One is called act utilitarianism. An action is right if it produces maximum utility. That is to say, results in the greatest happiness of the greatest number. It is every action we need to calculate. Sometimes when you kill people, that results in very low number of happiness, of small utility value. Sometimes you commit another murder and everybody hated that person, and so maybe that has high utility then, isn't it? So it really depends on who you kill. Not the act of murder itself, but who you kill will impact whether an action has high utility or low utility. Now, that is not a good way or a solid foundation of morals and legislation, isn't it? Imagine we follow what Jeremy Bentham says here and create our laws around act utilitarianism. The judge is to calculate your action to see how much utility you produce from that murder. Well, it depends on the popularity of the person you murdered. It depends on whether the person you murdered has family. It depends on what kind of jobs and social status the murder victim enjoyed. And so it will produce a different result every time. And if you turned out you murdered the public enemy number one, they may even praise you for it then, because it may be positive utility then. So that is not a solid foundation, isn't it, for morals and legislation. So some people say, well, maybe we should try rule utilitarianism. An action is right if it conforms to a rule that maximizes utility. So maybe they say in the long run, killing people has negative utility versus positive utility if we take all murders together. Some murders, one individual murder may have positive utility, another murder may have negative utility, but when we add up all murders together, we end up with low utility. And so therefore, we should make this into a rule that all acts of murder is bad because in general, they produce low utility. And here's the thing. How do you know? How do you know such things? Are there exceptions to the case? If we look at our legal system, there are exceptions. But who is to say what has high utility, what has low utility, for how long? For 5 years, for 10 years, for 30 years, for 100 years? And here's another thing. Utilitarianism itself. What is the utility of it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Does it produce greatest happiness of the greatest number of people? I'm talking about the concept utilitarianism itself. Well, the very concept of utilitarianism itself cannot be calculated as to whether it produces the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people or not. And so, based on utilitarianism itself is unknown how much utility it produces, and therefore it cannot be the foundation of anything at all. So, teleological ethics, utilitarianism, that seems like a bad source of ethics. Well, maybe we can try for option number 2, deontological ethics. Something is right because it is right. It just is right. It is not that murder has low utility, that is why thou shalt not murder, but rather murder is wrong every time, all time, everywhere, for all people. And so something is right because it is right. Something is wrong because it is wrong. Now, if God exists, then this is quite easy to understand. Something is right. Well, what does God say? Whatever God says goes. And God said that is right, then it is right. God said that that is wrong, then it is wrong. But without God, it is very hard to imagine how can we even tell whether something is right or not. Because it could come down to just your preferences. If you say murder is bad because it is bad, now I can say murder is right because it is right. It is a matter of opinion, your opinion versus my opinion. Now, if God does not exist, then we live in a indifferent universe. The universe is just something that is made up of time plus matter plus chance over a long period of time. Molecules vibrate randomly at different levels, and they clash into each other, they combine, they form other chemicals, and then here we are, a planet, people, animals, birds, trees, but the universe itself doesn't care. The universe itself has no moral values. It doesn't know what is right or what is wrong. It is basically just molecules and atoms and particles bumping into each other, moving at random direction for a very, very long time. Now, why? How can you derive right or wrong from it? You cannot. And so that is a big problem, isn't it? Because without God as the arbiter, as the one who has the final say as to whether something is right or wrong, what authority is there? What other authority that can impose right and wrong on humanity? Wouldn't it all be just a matter of taste? How can we say that something is right because it is absolutely right and something is wrong because it is absolutely wrong? So again, philosophers and thinkers have picked up this challenge and tried to construct a deontological ethics without God. And that is Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, he came up with the idea called categorical imperative. It seems very, very technical term, but its meaning is actually quite easy to understand. Every action, for example, murder, can it be universalized? What happens if everyone does it? If everyone does it, then it's gonna be mayhem. It's gonna be terrible. It is basically unlivable if everybody practices murder. Therefore, murder must be bad. It cannot be universalized. Or lying. Well, Immanuel Kant will say, what if everyone does it? What if everyone lies? Would it be a good thing or a bad thing? Can you universalize it? Can you live in such a society? And the answer is no. You cannot live in a society where everyone lies, where everyone steals, where everyone murders. So all these things are wrong and need to be outlawed. So what about helping one another? What if everyone does it? Then it will be wonderful. It will be beautiful. It will be great. It is something that should be universalized, and so it is the right thing to do. So Immanuel Kant says this is how you know something is right because it is right, or something is wrong because it is wrong, because you can universalize it. If you universalize it and it's good, then it's good. If you universalize it and it's not livable, then it is bad. But there's something very wrong with what Immanuel Kant says, isn't it? What if the categorical imperatives clashes? What if they contradict one another? Let's take a look at an example. Lying is wrong because you cannot universalize it. If everyone lies, then it's not the kind of world that you want to live in. So lying is wrong. All right. Saving lives is right because you can universalize it. If all of us would save lives, then we would live in a much better place. So it is universalizable, so it is right. But what about lying in order to save lives? For example, let's just say somebody comes to your house and says, is your father home? And he's holding a gun. And you know that if he say he's home, then the guy would come in and murder your father. And if you say no, then he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't come into the house. Now, your father's at home. Do you tell the lie or do you not tell a lie? If you say, my father is at home, what happened is that you have obeyed the command not to lie, but you have disobeyed the command to save lives. Likewise, if you say, no, he's not at home, then you have obeyed saving lives, but you have committed the sin of lying. So what do we do in this particular case? What would Immanuel Kant say? Well, the only thing he could say, and he did say this, is that you must still tell the truth. Because although saving lives is right, but it is not you who killed your father, you see. Your job is to don't tell the lie. Now, then it is that other man's moral duty to not kill your father as a result of you telling the truth. Now, if he does it, and he killed your father, then it is he who did wrong. So you did nothing wrong. You did absolutely the right thing. You have the moral responsibility not to tell lies, but your father's death cannot be blamed on you. It is the moral responsibility of the murderer who disobeyed the command to not murder. And so this is Immanuel Kant's solution. Are you satisfied with this solution? Nobody is satisfied with this solution, because according to Immanuel Kant's deontological ethics, something is right because you can universalize it, something is wrong because you cannot universalize it. There is no way to rank these attributes. Who is to rank, right? Who has the right to rank which one is more important than the other one? They're all on the same level. And so Immanuel Kant's solution is that it is your duty to tell the truth. It is that other person's duty not to kill your father. And that is a solution that nobody is happy with. So as a source of ethics, deontological ethics without God leads to nowhere. Well, I will give you the moral argument for the existence of God. There exist such things as morally right and morally wrong that are universal. There are such things, isn't it? Let's just say the whole world now does not believe that murder is wrong. Does that mean murder is right? No, of course not. Murder is morally wrong. It is a universal wrong. Whether anyone believes it or not is immaterial. It is objectively wrong. It doesn't depend on whether people think that it is right or wrong. And that is a fact that all of us accept and all of us understand. There exist such things as morally right and morally wrong that are universal. Otherwise, why would people say the existence of evil proves that God does not exist? Well, then the question is, who is to say what is right and wrong? Are you saying that there are such things as objective moral right and objective moral wrong that are universal? If you say no, it is subjective, then I would say, well, what is right to you is wrong to me. What is wrong to you is right to me because it is subjective. So when you say when such an evil thing happens, that must prove that God does not exist. Well, I would say, well, that's not so evil of a thing after all. In fact, that's a good thing, and that proves the existence of God. So for this argument to even work, people must first say there are such things that are morally right and morally wrong that are universal. Now, if there are universal moral right and wrong, then there is a universal moral law, or else how can you tell the two apart? Then, if there is a universal moral law, then there is a universal moral lawgiver. Now you ask the question, why should there be a universal moral lawgiver? The answer is, well, the moral law cannot come into existence out of nothing. what gave rise to the universal moral law? You say, well, the universe gives rise to the universal moral law. Then the universe is the moral lawgiver. And I say, well, it is actually evolution. Darwinianism is what gives rise to a universal sense of moral right and wrong. Then Darwinianism is the universal moral lawgiver. It cannot come from nowhere. And I'm just going to take a moment here to talk about what if we evolved our sense of morality. Well, here's the thing. If we were to evolve differently, because we could evolve differently, right? It's, after all, a random mutation, a random process. If we were to evolve differently, then we would say that what is morally right and what is morally wrong that are universal would be different, would be completely different. But we just said, if you commit murder, and even if the whole world thinks that murder is right, we still want to say that murder is wrong, and that is what it means by something being universal. Now, if we were to evolve differently, then we would have a different sense of what is morally right and morally wrong, isn't it? So it is no longer universal. But regardless, we still need to have a universal moral lawgiver. The question then is, if, as we said earlier, the universe itself cannot produce a moral law, because the universe doesn't care. The universe is not a being. The universe is just a collection of matter that went through a long process of time and move at random directions. That's all the universe is. So the universe cannot produce moral argument. Darwinianism itself is, if it is true and proven, is also a mechanism of the universe. So it also cannot produce moral laws. Actually, the universal moral lawgiver is God. He is the only one who qualifies to be the universal moral lawgiver. And so you see that the fact that we have a universal moral right and wrong, that points to the existence of God. Without God, you cannot build a solid foundation for ethics, for morality, or even for legislation. You can still do it simply because God exists. You may or may not believe in his existence, but because he exists and you live in his universe, therefore, there are such things as morally right and morally wrong, and you're capable of detecting them even if you don't believe in him. But without God, there is no solid foundation for morality. So here's for your discussion. Evaluate the teleological approach to ethics, which is something is right if it produces the right results. Do you think it succeeds in creating a solid basis for ethics? How would you improve it? Question number 2, what about the ontological approach by Immanuel Kant? Do you understand the moral argument for the existence of God? Present it to one another in your discussion group. And number 4, write down questions you may have on this topic. Your facilitator will compile them and send to me, and I will answer it next week. So have a great discussion time. I will see you again after the discussion.